Please.
One, Charlie, take one.
Marker.
My name is Carrie Rose O'Connell, and on behalf of AFMX, our board of directors, and our entire volunteer staff, welcome to AFMX's 10th anniversary hybrid edition. Today you're joining us for Inside the Inside Pitch with Christopher Lockhart and Genevieve Trainor as our moderator. Big round of applause. Thank you. So we're delighted you could join us for today's center stage conversation. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Genevieve Trainor. Genevieve is an actor with market research background that includes 15,000 hours of studying the human journey. Genevieve also works in development and marketing, and she hosts and produces the radio show CinemaScope for KSFR 101.1 FM and KSFR.org, an NPR affiliate. So thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Carrie Rose. Thank you. All right. I hope you all don't get too sick of me because you're sort of stuck with me. But we are so excited to have Christopher Lockhart here talking about Inside the Inside Pitch.
I don't know what that means, but we'll figure it out.
Sure. So just a little background on Christopher. This is his first time in Albuquerque.
First time in New Mexico.
Yes, in New Mexico. Yes, so thank you so much for traveling over here from Los Angeles. So he's an executive filmmaker and educator. He has 30 plus years of experience and has read over 60,000 screenplays. 60,000. As story editor at talent agency WME, and he's also a creative executive there. He curates film and TV projects for A-list actors such as Denzel Washington. Does anybody know who Denzel Washington is? Yeah. Yeah. And you work with his family. I didn't know that.
I do, yes.
I just learned that last night. Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah. So as an independent filmmaker, he produced The Collector, the collection, the documentary Most Valuable Players for Oprah Winfrey, and American Skin. He's also producing the upcoming feature film Solitary with David Oyelowo.
That's actually in post.
In post. Oh, you're in
It's
post.
done.
Wow. Okay. That's wonderful. He also guides 14,000 screenwriters and filmmakers on how to pitch and structure their projects for the best chance of success through his online classroom, The Inside Pitch. If you all haven't become members of that group, it is amazing. It is worth being on Facebook for. It is a master classes. I think you've definitely maximized all of the possible features of Facebook to make it it's amazing. He also was nominated for an Emmy Award for the live version of the Inside Pitch filmed in Los Angeles. He's a member of the Writers Guild of America, the Producers Guild of America, and the Television Academy. So by show of hands, how many of you have pitched a project to an executive, producer, agent, manager? How many in here have pitched a project? Okay. All right. So you're in the right place. And if you want to pitch a project, this is absolutely the right place to be. So a little bit about your background growing up, how you got into this business. You grew up on Staten Island. You received your MFA from NYU in dramatic writing. And so when you and I met for the radio show CinemaScope earlier this year, you said you always thought you'd be a starving playwright and living in New York. Was there a transformative event or a process that changed this for you? Was it moving to LA or what?
It was probably going to graduate school.
Okay.
And I think so my focus switched there a little bit. I was actually was a school teacher. So I taught at South Shore High School in Brooklyn while I was going to graduate school. And I just assumed that I would be a teacher and I would be writing plays and, probably writing bad plays and struggling. And but when I was in graduate school, I discovered screenwriting, and I'd always loved movies, but as a kid, movies were sort of unattainable. It was easier to write a play and put on a play than it would be to actually shoot a film. So, but when I was in graduate school, I learned the language of film, which was kind of hard for me at first. And my very first screenplay, I won a contest. The script got optioned, and it got bought. And so I was in graduate school, and I was already in the WGA.
Wow.
As a result.
Cool.
And I was doing internships also. So I did an internship at a theater company in Manhattan, and I did an internship at Columbia Pictures. And I just remember, like, the employees at the theater looked so raggedy. And the employees at the studio just looked so pristine, like it looked like they ate every day. And so eventually I decided, while I was still in graduate school, that I would move out to LA. So 3 weeks after I graduated, I went to LA. I'd never been there before. I didn't have a job. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a place to live. I got out there and I was like, what the fuck did I do? Like, am I nuts?
You're still there.
I stuck it out.
Yeah. You have a funny story you shared last night about how you ended up.
I was at a crossroads in my life. I get a call from the assistant to Ed L'Amato, who was the co-president of ICM, which was a talent agency, which was just absorbed very recently by CAA. Ed was the Uber agent. He's now passed, but he discovered the likes of Mel Gibson and Richard Gere and Denzel Washington and Michelle Pfeiffer and Robert Downey Jr. and Liam Neeson and so on and so on and so on. So he needs a person who is going to be his librarian, sort of a script consultant who can read scripts for him because he can't read everything that comes over the transom. So they say, would you come in and interview with him? And I did not want to work at a talent agency. No way. Wasn't interested. But the way they got my name was through a mutual friend, and I didn't want to burn any bridges. So out of respect for the mutual friend, I went to the interview. The interview was about 3 minutes long. This guy was very disinterested. He had like a lot of other things going on. He had 3 assistants, of whom were named with numbers. There was assistant number 1, assistant number 2, and assistant number 3. And when he called him, he rang a bell. He rang the bell once for assistant 1, twice for assistant 2, and 3 times for the 3rd assistant. I thought, this is nuts. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. So the interview's over, and I get escorted out and into an office. And they're like, so we need you to read those scripts. That's your phone. This is your computer, and HR will be calling you shortly. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, this was just an interview. Like, I'm not prepared. And the guy said, you want to go in there and tell him that you don't want this job? And it was a Tuesday, and I figured, all right, I'll stick it out until Friday, and then I'll quit over the weekend because I was way too much of a coward to do it any other way. I was asked to read a specific script that night from Mel Gibson, who was the biggest movie star in the world at the time. And the next day I get called into Ed's office, and who's in Ed's office but Mel Gibson? And so now Mel's asking me my opinion on the script as if like my opinion mattered at all, right? Like the day before, nobody gave a damn about my opinion. Now all of a sudden, like the biggest movie star in the world, it's just so weird, this business. And so I was like, wow, this is really cool. And so I stuck it out.
Yeah, here you are. I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. So getting back to the starving artist mentality, for other screenwriters in the room with the starving artist mentality, do you have any advice for how they can help get rid of that?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong, actually, with being a starving artist, except the fact that you go hungry. But look, I think that there are a lot of ways that you can channel your art where you can make money. So, you can always pursue your art, but also find other ways to use it. So when I took my job in the agency business 25 years ago. I was coming off of 10 years working as a professional writer. And I was at this emotional crossroads. And so I found that this job was a way for me to sort of use my creativity, but just in a different way. And then it opened up other doors. It enabled me to meet people to where I could eventually put projects together and produce. I develop projects. So it opened up this whole world to me that I never saw when they first pushed me into that office. So just be open-minded, use your art in other ways, maybe ways that are a little bit out of your comfort zone, but ways that you can potentially earn a living.
So we've talked about a little bit about Ed L'Amato. You have this unique role in the industry. What do you do as a story editor?
So first of all, I work at a talent agency, WME. It's the world's largest diversified talent agency. I am not an agent. I like to make that very clear. And I am the story editor there, and my job is basically to look for potential projects for, maybe 20 of our biggest clients. They could be actors, they could be writer-directors. And so that encompasses a lot of stuff. But it's a job that's it's kind of like an amalgam between like being a dramaturg at a theater and being a development executive at a studio. So there's a lot of reading, there's a lot of notes. I will read draft after draft after draft of a script that a client is involved in to make sure that the integrity of that project, the elements that attracted the client to begin with, remain intact throughout the process. I help clients to develop material. So writer-directors, I will help them with a concept, and I'll help them to develop it into an outline, into a screenplay, into a film. I'll be on set. I work in post, in the editing room. Anything that has to do with the creative process, anywhere from beginning to end, my job is to help my clients realize their creative goals.
Great. Very helpful. So, is there a common misconception that screenwriters and filmmakers have about the types of screenplays that pique the interest of A-list talent? Or, we talked about in a CinemaScope episode how you're not necessarily looking for a great script, you're looking for the right script.
Yeah, like I say that, it's really kind of semantics, but because there's a lot of things go into finding material. I could read a fantastic script, but it's not a script that works for any of my clients, so it's a pass. That doesn't mean that, it's not going to get picked up somewhere else, and maybe George Clooney, who's not a client, will star in it, rather than any of my clients. It's not the end of the line. I don't kill material. That's not what I do. It just moves on.
Yeah.
So what was the question?
Is there a common misconception that screenwriters and filmmakers have about the types of projects that get picked up? I think you covered.
Yeah, it's like everything that I do is holistic. So I don't have like a checklist of the do's and the don'ts of screenwriting. I can't espouse any of that because it doesn't make any sense to me. I would never tell somebody, don't do this in a script. Maybe you shouldn't do it because you're not that talented, but you can do it and it'll be brilliant. So I don't want to tell people what to do and what not to do. I just think people should write what they write, and if they're talented, if they have an innate ability, then that talent will be discovered.
Okay.
Somehow, some way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little more work in it than just that. You've got to put your work out there. You have to make yourself vulnerable. Actors do that all the time, right? Because they're always out for auditions and, often getting rejected. And it's hard because it's often face-to-face. Maybe not so much anymore with Zoom, I don't know. But
I just go in a black hole. Your auditions is an audition.
There you go. But writing, they kind of write and then they don't share their stuff. They don't put it out there in the world, and you need to do that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the inside pitch. You dedicate, again, completely free, so he's not there countless hours to the inside pitch. He's not selling everything.
Not selling anything.
He doesn't sell anything.
Not making
through the
any
group.
money.
Yeah.
That's not the goal. Correct.
Yeah.
That's not the goal.
Yeah, and the members of the group, they runs a gamut from screenwriters, filmmakers, actors. As an educator, what's your approach to moderating the group?
Oh, wow. I really wish I had some sort of brilliant answer to this.
Well, didn't you read the guide in advance?
Yeah, I must have skimmed over that.
Just kidding.
I must have been like, that's a dumb question. I'm just gonna
pretend like it doesn't exist.
I'm not the kind of person that particularly dissects processes. Like, I just do what I do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So again, I'm not always the greatest interview in that respect. I wish I could say, well, if you want to moderate a Facebook group, you need to do this, this. I'm sure that there are things that I do well. I kick people out very easily, so I can tell you that. That works really well. And I think you have to lead by example. All right, maybe this will be a good answer.
Yeah.
You have to lead by example. And I think that there are a lot of people that come in, because we'll do a lot of feedback stuff. So somebody will put a logline up there, and then people will offer feedback. And there's always these cowboys that are like, this logline sucks, and you shouldn't be writing an email, you loser. And that always pisses me off because, not to sound like a dick, but it's like I do this thing all the time, every single day. I've been doing it for 30 years. If anybody has the right to criticize somebody like that, it'll be me.
Yeah.
Not some schmuck who doesn't know, shit from Shinola.
Yeah.
Not acceptable.
Yeah.
And yet, that's not the way I treat people.
Yeah.
So I think people come in and they see, this guy takes everything seriously. This is the dumbest question that anybody could have ever asked. And this guy answers it with a lot of thought and a lot of sincerity. Mm-hmm. And I think that follows through and people behave the same way. So you lead by example.
And overall, it's a very respectful group.
It's a very respectful group for 14,000. And that's not a particularly large Facebook group by any means.
What surprised you the most since you started the group?
I think it's nice that when people sort of reach out and say, hey, this just happened to me. I just sold the script, or I just got this agent, or, my movie was just released. And the support of that group was really helpful. It was really motivating. I was able to find a network of people there that I have befriended. So when you hear that it's actually impacted the creativity of people, then I think that's good.
Unlike other groups, you don't monetize anything, which we talked about. What motivates you to provide what's effectively a public service?
Well, it was like that or Habitat for Humanity. And I'm not building houses. So I was a teacher.
Yeah.
I was a teacher. Yeah. When I graduated from NYU, I was awarded the university's Public Service Prize for my dedication to public education. Mm-hmm. And I always felt like, wow, I got to live up to that.
Yeah.
It's like a little scroll that's thrown in the back of a closet somewhere.
Wow, that was an effective award that they gave you.
I figure this is my public service because it's really all that I can do. I'm very limited. I really can't talk about anything. I'm not into sports. I really don't like to talk about politics. The only thing that I know is movies. Everything that I do, all of my pastime, everything revolves around the movies. Mm-hmm. Whether that's good or bad, that's what I do. That's who I am. That is my passion. Mm-hmm. And so I share that.
Yeah.
I share that in the group.
And you bring in other people. They're excellent Q&As. You had recently, last year, Christopher McQuarrie on.
He was our very first live interview. He won the Academy Award for The Usual Suspects. He just directed Tom Cruise in Top Gun 2 Maverick, which he also wrote. We just interviewed Tyler Tice last weekend. He wrote Day Shift, which is the Jamie Foxx vampire movie that's on Netflix. Man, you want to hear a story? Like, this guy has struggled for 20 years, and he sells that script. And the way that project came together, there is so much serendipity that it is frightening. It's like I hear his story, and it's scary, because it's like, God, how could anybody ever get a movie made when the way his project came together was by so much happenstance? And yet that's the way the business often works. And so it's both frightening but yet motivating.
Yeah.
Got to stick with it. You got to stick with it. That guy stuck with it for 20 years. What's the most unusual script that caught my attention and went the furthest?
Furthest in your
Well,
career.
look, first of all, I will say that many of the scripts that I read make it all the way, because if they're coming to people like Denzel or Christian Bale or Rachel McAdams or Matt Damon, they're pretty far along. They have financing, they're like ready to go. So I would say probably Adaptation by Charlie Kaufman. I thought that was a pretty weird script, and I loved it. I loved it. And I made my boss read it, and he hated it. It's like, I don't get it. But I kind of felt like, wow, like this script was like written for me. And oddly, I think it works better as a screenplay. I actually think that it works better as a screenplay than it does a movie, because there's so much stuff that's lost in the translation, because it's about a screenwriter writing a screenplay, and it actually works better as a screenplay, if that makes any sense.
Interesting. Yeah, good question.
In my opinion.
Yeah. When a screenwriter gets to Christopher McQuarrie's level of success, there seems to be this belief that they no longer need to pitch. I think we saw from Josh earlier, that's not true. The pitching is ongoing always.
What Christopher McQuarrie said to me was that when there's a meeting, he goes in with the executives and says, okay, what can I do for you? So he doesn't pitch anything.
He doesn't?
No, he makes them work. And when you're Christopher McQuarrie, you can do that. But for most of everybody else on the planet, we have to pitch.
We have to pitch, yeah. So we're going to take a look at some log lines, which is a huge part of pitching, right? So before we do that, you recommend that screenwriters develop a strong log line before a screenplay is even developed, since it may be the only way a new writer stands an iota of a chance to capture the attention of executives or producers or reps, if that's what they're looking for. So one key goal of the group, as you alluded to, is that members become able to develop a succinct, compelling logline. Members post their log lines to the group to obtain group feedback. What are the key components of a logline?
All right, so first of all, a log line is basically a pitch, but it's just a very brief pitch of like a sentence. And so you're being asked to reduce your screenplay, take your 120-page screenplay, and reduce it to one sentence. And that sounds like it should be difficult, but it's really not difficult, because the truth is that, and this is all, of course, my opinion, but if you're writing a screenplay, your idea should be small. You should really have a small idea, and then you complicate that idea through the plot. But you can look at a play like Hamlet. It doesn't get much more complicated than that, but you can boil that down to that it's a story of a young prince who sets out to avenge the murder of his father. That's what Hamlet is at its core. It's very simple to communicate that. And that's what good writing, that's what good screenwriting is that you can communicate the core of your story, the drama, the conflict, the through line very easily. And that's what you should be able to do in a logline. Now, most writers have a difficult time doing that. Why? Not because they can't write loglines, because that's what they all love to say. Oh, logline writing is so hard. It's not hard. The reason that you're having a hard time doing it is because your screenplay is broken. It is fractured. It doesn't work. And we heard Josh say earlier, not about the logline, but about the outline, I think he said, or the pitch, where if the screenplay's not working, that manifests itself in the pitch. And it's the same exact thing with the logline. 9 out of 10 times. A logline basically encapsulates the first act of your screenplay, because in the first act of the screenplay, you are setting up 3 vital elements. Who is the protagonist? What does the protagonist want? And what stands in the protagonist's way? So think about your own screenplay. Let me ask those questions again. Who is your protagonist? Think about that. What does your protagonist want? A lot of you are sputtering there now all of a sudden. A lot of you, I'd say probably most of you, because this is where most screenplays fail, and this is why most loglines do not work. And then lastly is what stands in the character's way? What is that antagonistic force that is preventing the character from achieving what it is that she wants? So just who is the protagonist, what does the protagonist want, and what stands in the protagonist's way? It's that simple. So to start writing a logline, really all you need to do is answer those 3 questions and then use the connective tissue to put them together in a sentence that makes sense. That's simple.
Done.
That's simple.
Yeah. So let's take a look at some of the log lines. We have 5 log lines that Christopher is very kindly going to review for us, and I know that the filmmakers, we communicated in advance of today, and I think you are here. So could you just raise your hand?
You might want to remain anonymous until I'm done. Don't be so quick to put your hand up. I'm kidding.
But who, by show of hands, who are the filmmakers who are brave and submitted log lines that we're going to take a look at? One brave soul.
3.
Where's the 3rd one? All right. Awesome. All right.
Okay.
4. Okay. Cool.
Okay,
cool. So let's take a look.
okay, let me first, if I may.
Yes, please.
Let me preface. This is only my opinion. All right, we are clear on that, correct? There are a million other opinions in the world. Now, I will grant you that my opinion is fairly well informed. But it is still only an opinion.
All right, let's do this. Okay, log line number 1. So this is, this is Crystal Thomas, and it's Puebla Esperanza. I'm going to butcher this, I'm sorry. Say it one more. Esperanza. Okay, and the project type is a film. So it's a pair of undercover agents travel to an inn in a charming southwestern town to investigate the source of a powerful new drug, only to discover that the cartels are just as curious about the area and that the Pueblo's deep trauma is about to force a reckoning.
Okay, very good, thank you. So as we look at these things, I'll just sort of talk about some things that I think maybe work in a log line and maybe don't work. And my guess is that I'm probably not going to say anything that most of you aren't already thinking, or maybe you don't quite know how to articulate it, but you know by looking at this if this is working for you or not working for you. So I would just say a couple, and then let me also just say this. So many prefaces, but this is the way things work. So we're looking at a log line, and we're looking at it perhaps in 2 ways. So I'm looking at it as a teacher, right? Okay, how can I offer feedback here that could be instructive and constructive to help? But also, as an executive, I'm looking at it as, is this a movie? Because that's what I really do for a living. Yeah, I read scripts, but I'm really looking for movies. So you're really looking at it from 2 perspectives here, at least. All right, so a pair of undercover agents travel to an inn. So the first thing that I would say is word economy is very important in a log line. And it's always about cause and effect in a log line. So don't mention superfluous details unless they pay off in the log line. This is not the screenplay. it's the logline. They're two completely separate elements. And while the in might play an incredibly important role in the screenplay, it does not here. It's merely a superfluous detail. Because the inn doesn't come back in any way. It's just they travel to an inn in a charming southwestern town. I would say just have them travel to a charming southwestern town. We don't need the mention of the inn for the logline. It's superfluous. It's just another detail that somebody has to process. If the inn paid off, like we find out that the cartel is working out of the inn, then it boomerangs back, it makes sense. But here, it's just a mention. Loglines are about specificity, nothing vague in a logline. Everything has to be specific. The objective is, when you're done, I have to be able to understand your movie. There is no poetry in a logline. There is no being coy. There is no being mysterious. It is, who is the protagonist? What does the protagonist want? And what stands in the protagonist's way. So we do get a little bit of that information here, right? So who is the protagonist? We're going to say that it's the pair of undercover agents. In most screenplays, probably one of those two is the story probably leans more toward that one person. Like in Training Day, for example, right? It's Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke. Whose movie is it? Denzel won the Academy Award for Best Actor, but it's not his movie. It's Ethan Hawke's movie. It's Ethan Hawke's story. It's his first day training in a new precinct. He's the one who's faced with the moral dilemmas. It's his story. Denzel is actually a supporting character in many ways. It's just a very big performance. So usually in two-handers, one of those pair will sort of lead the way a little bit. And so you might want to focus in on that, perhaps. So like, an alcoholic FBI agent and his partner. And so now we've pulled out the character that perhaps our focus needs to go on. That also helps me. So like if I'm looking at something for Christian Bale or Nicolas Cage, a pair of undercover agents doesn't help me. I don't even know what the gender is. I know nothing here. So it's not very informative. You didn't think that I could go on for 20 minutes about like 3 words, did you? All right, so I'm just going to kind of skip a little bit here. Let's just go to the very end where it says, the Pueblo's deep trauma is about to force a reckoning. I don't know what that means. I just don't know what that means. I mean, I can guess, but I don't know what that means. So, like, it's poetic, but it's not cinematic. We're making movies, not poetry. Just tell me. No mystery. Just tell me. Just got to give me the information. Listen, by the way, I'm not saying that this is a bad logline. I'm saying that this is not a strong logline. But this certainly has the ingredients, but the writer needs to be more specific to investigate the source of a powerful new drug. Source is a very interesting word because it almost sort of has here like a sense of magical realism to it. Like why not just say investigate the cartel or, investigate. So I don't know, it's an interesting word choice, and I don't know if it's a word choice that is trying to communicate something else, like in the subtext, which is fine, or if it's just a choice of word. But every single word in the logline gets into my head and makes me think one way or another way. So word choice is vitally important because this is what stands between you and me reading your screenplay. Because I get a trillion query letters or people calling and say, hey, would you read my script? And I can't read everybody's script. There's not enough time in the day for me to do that. So I say, what's your log line? And if the log line clicks for me, I'll say, that's interesting. Yes, I'll read that. Or it's not interesting. Or just in this case, it doesn't work. Maybe it could be interesting, but it doesn't work, so it's a pass. Because I'm not a teacher at the office. You know, I've got like 80,000 other things that I have to read. I have clients who are like, where's my next project? Where's my next project? Don't have time to coddle anybody at work.
Yeah.
Inside pitch, I'll kiss your ass all day long. No, I think you should be clear. So the question was, do we specify gender or race?
Ethnicity, like status, age, you know, stuff that's
Yeah, I mean,
identity-wise.
age, not necessarily unless it's really important. Like here, I can probably guess that the undercover agents aren't going to be 15, right? Because if they were, then that would probably be specified here.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I think that if it's important, because the truth is that I look at material for the most part, and I don't look at it. I just read it, and if I think like a male role is good for a female, then I make that suggestion. You know, I don't care about all that stuff. Sometimes you can't easily make a switch. Like this American Gigolo with John Bernthal, who happens to be a client. Rosie O'Donnell is playing a detective in it, and that role, which was originally played by Hector Elizondo in the film with Richard Gere and other clients, is now being played by a woman. And in the early drafts of this pilot, it was also written for a man. And then they just said, you know, let's toss in Rosie. So, you know, we don't always pay that much close attention to all that stuff.
Thank you.
Good question. All right, next log lines.
Short one.
Yes, on the cuffs of turning 18, a young boy is abandoned with little to nothing on his back. Musicality is all he owns, and that's all he'll need. This
Okay.
is Kevin Kevin, are you here? I don't want to butcher your last name too. Okay,
It's all right,
Kevin.
'cause
Kevin's not here, so
I'm
yeah.
about to butcher his log line.
Oh no, he's probably going to watch this afterward.
All right, so this
It's a film, all-star.
this is not a log line. A log line has to tell me who is the protagonist, what does the protagonist want, and what stands in the protagonist's way. I just made that very clear about 80 times, right? So you should be able to look at this and say, all right, this is not a log line. This is like more of a tagline, right? Like you might see this on a movie poster. Musicality is all he owns, and that's all he'll need. But that's not a log line. First of all, it starts off really weird. On the cuffs of turning 18, that's like a whole lot to say. And then he says a young boy. Well, a young boy is like 5 or 6. A young boy isn't 18, right? I mean, if you're 18, you're like a teenager. You're right. So to me, that's like immediately it gets off to a bad start. And then he's abandoned. Okay, and then what? I don't know what this means. Obviously, he's a musician, I guess, or something. But I don't have a clue what this is. Not a clue.
Okay.
I have to understand it. How many of you here know what this is about? Honestly, say I'm wrong. Help this poor writer. Show him what an ass I am. Put your arm up. How many of you know exactly what this movie is about based on this log line? Hand up, real high. Wave it. You do.
One person.
What is it about? Are you the writer of this?
It just vaguely is somebody who goes from rags to riches, and that's it. I don't know.
Listen, you could be right, but that's a guess. Yes?
That's a guess. Yeah,
It's a guess, right?
Yeah.
But that's not. But like, you know, I'm not the Amazing Kreskin. I dated myself with that. Excuse me.
I could give you another guess.
But that's just it, right? Is that it's like I don't want to guess. I just want to know what your story's about. That's it. Who's the protagonist? What's the protagonist want? What stands in the protagonist's way? It's all I want. It's really simple if you've written a screenplay that works. If you've written a screenplay that doesn't work, all of a sudden you are struggling. Like, okay, so what does my character want? Oh, I know what he wants. He wants to find peace in the world. And I'm like, well, okay, but how do you dramatize that? Because in cinema, you have to find a cinematic metaphor for that. Like I could say that The Wizard of Oz is about a teenage girl's search for her place in the world. But the writers had enough common sense to create a metaphor, which is that she finds herself far away from home, struggling to get back. That's what drama does. That's what cinema does. It creates metaphors for stuff that's internal. That's drama. And so this, by the way, this could be brilliant. You know, it could be like an amazing screenplay. I don't know. You don't leave out the goods. Like, Almeda Rice said, oh, well, you know, I didn't put the best part in there. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, would you write a logline for Jaws and leave out the shark? Like, that makes no sense. That makes no sense.
Hypothetically, if this was the logline for Almost Famous, how would you hypothetically suggest to be written?
So listen, I have read, as I've said, many, many screenplays, and I have written loglines for many, many screenplays, of which sometimes screenplays are a little more difficult. Like, let's say it is an ensemble piece, right? Now, all of a sudden, so let's say it's a movie like Love Actually, right, which has 8 different stories. So all of a sudden, who's the protagonist? What does the protagonist want? What stands in the protagonist's way? All of a sudden, that becomes a challenge, correct? Based on what it is that I've said. That doesn't mean that I can't write a logline for it, right? I just do it a little bit differently. So I look for themes or motifs, because in an ensemble piece, typically the various stories are all threaded together with a theme. In Love Actually, it's love. And it's set at Christmas time. So those are 2 commonalities that are seen in all of those stories, and then you could craft a logline that way and just say something like a varied group of Brits, you know, struggles with the ups and downs of life and love during the Christmas season. It's not specific because that particular screenplay doesn't lend itself to that. But that doesn't mean that you still can't give somebody at least a specific idea. This, I don't know what this is. Even if it is something like Almost Famous, you could certainly find a way to craft this that would give somebody at least a modicum of information to be able to see the movie. I can't see the movie. How many of you can see this movie? So, okay, one person can. Right. And again, like I said,
But I see the directness that you're speaking
my opinion,
about.
right? So if this crosses my desk, it's a pass. If it crosses your desk, maybe it will be a read. But the problem is that the majority of the people in here, their hands didn't go up. So that means that this writer's got to work a lot harder to find you amongst the many. And that's not what you want to do, because this business is hard enough, right? And by the way, you don't want me to assume your story. You have just spent 6 months to a year. Why would you ever want anybody to assume your story? You want them to know what your story is, because it's a good story and it's a strong story, and so you want to present it so somebody can understand it. If you were to go pitch to somebody, right, would you pitch like this?
And then there's and then she's gonna come in and she's gonna.
Would you want to pitch like that? Probably not. That is what I just did. That is the logline equivalent to what I just did.
And we will go to the next logline. This is Christina Love, Firestorm, and it's a limited series.
Okay, like that.
When Galileo's domestic life decays and his ambitions are thwarted in the libertine Venetian Republic, he sets his hopes on Florence, wooing the papal-friendly Medici family. Medici? Oh,
Medici.
gosh, I'm Medici. I'm terrible. I'm like,
I think it's Medici.
Medici, right? Family with his discovery of Jupiter's moons.
All right, so when you offer a log line for a series, it tends to be broader, right? Because this represents what the series is about, as opposed to an individual episode. So, oh, that's the pilot episode. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, the thing that I'm always looking for in a log line is conflict, right? Because that's the lifeblood of drama. I mean, drama means conflict, and vice versa. And so, to me, it's all about conflict. It's the conflict that's in the concept. It's the conflict that's in your character. It's the way your character conflicts with the concept, and so on and so on. It's all about conflict. And so this feels kind of a little. Are you the author here? Yeah. Okay. So this feels a little conflict light to me. Now listen, this is a really interesting time period, right? Galileo, really interesting, going from one place to another. But the problem is that I don't really understand what the conflict is. So he goes to Florence, and then what? That's the problem. That's what I'm really missing here. Because you're saying, that he's wooing the papal-friendly Medici family with his discovery of Jupiter's moons. What does that mean? I don't really know what that means. Is there some kind of life and death situation that, he needs to convince them about Jupiter's moons? I don't understand what the story is. So he gets there, and then what? What's the conflict?
The conflict is he betrays the Doge for the Medici.
He betrays who?
The Doge of Venice, who had just given him a lifetime position. So he's betraying one power and wooing a bigger power.
Okay, why don't you say that here?
I don't know, I should.
Yeah, it's just, you had written, and again, I don't know how much of that is in your pilot. Because again, it's like people just don't leave out the shark. You don't leave out the shark. Like if you wrote a screenplay for Jaws, you wouldn't leave out the shark. You just wouldn't. I want to make sure that this is like getting through. So, if this is your shark in your pilot, I ask, why did you leave it out? Or is it maybe just sort of an incidental thing that it doesn't play as an important role in it? I haven't read the script, so I don't know. But I always feel like subliminally you lean into what the story is about. And so maybe that's what it's about, and it feels a little conflict light to me. But this other element is certainly interesting.
Thank you.
But you can't leave the stuff behind, right? You gotta, it's gotta be there.
Can you please elaborate when you say for a pilot, a series, you said make it broader?
Yeah, so
but don't leave out the shark.
Yeah, all right. So if you were gonna write a log line, let's say for, I'm gonna date myself, I Love Lucy, okay? Because we all know the series. So I'm going back because we go back to the very best. So a log line for I Love Lucy, the series, might be something like zany housewife struggles to get ahead with cockamamie schemes, much to the frustration of her Cuban band leader husband. And that's just and that kind of encapsulates what the show is always about, right? It's just a very broad, general sense of the series. Then I have to write a log line for an episode. And so log line for an episode might be Lucy finagles her way into a TV commercial spokesperson job where she hawks vitamin juice that's 35% alcohol. You would do one for the pilot, and if you had 10 other episodes, you would do one for each of those. Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I had a question about once again with the ensemble cast. You have, say, like the main story involves one character, but all the characters are unique and build to it. Would it be right to just say like an intergalactic group of misfits, so and so and so, conflict, or would you go like the refugee princess from a distant moon teams up with intergalactic criminal, a disgraced man of the cloth, or a faithless man of the cloth, a disgraced police officer, to blah 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 blah. What would be better in that scenario?
I would lean more toward the second one, so you can pull out that kind of leading character, but I wouldn't list each character. So like when I did a logline for Denzel for the remake of The Magnificent Seven, there's 7 characters, right? So it's a bounty hunter and 6 gunslingers. Yeah, I could have broken down all 6 of them, but then the logline becomes this, and it sort of defeats its purpose.
I remember seeing a poster once for Braveheart. It says, "Every man dies, but not every man really lives." Now, is that too brief for I mean, your logline wants to be a little more...
Because that is a tagline, and
Right.
that is invented for advertising purposes, right? A logline is not about that. It serves a very different function. A logline is not a tagline. So again, the reason that doesn't work as a logline is because there's no protagonist. We don't know what the protagonist wants, and we don't know what stands in the protagonist's way.
Right.
A logline for Braveheart would be something like a Scottish blah, blah, blah. I don't know what he is. What is he?
He's William Wallace.
He's William Wallace. But I would suggest that you avoid names in loglines because they don't really tell us anything. Like if I were to say in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, and you knew nothing about The Wizard of Oz, you don't know who Dorothy is. But if I instead said a lonely teenager, that tells you more about the character. But in Braveheart, we have the Scottish, whatever he is, struggles to win the freedom of Scotland from the clutches of the evil British king, or blah, 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 right? But those are the 3 elements, and then you put them into a prettier package, and I just did. That would be a logline.
And one quick thing, so would you mention like Robert the Bruce in your logline because of his character?
I would not, no.
Okay.
I would not. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't. I know there's this whole like pseudo-intellectual argument that Robert the Bruce is really the protagonist of Braveheart. Don't tell that to Mel Gibson. And Braveheart is ultimately Mel Gibson's story. That is William Wallace's story. Randall Wallace certainly created a really compelling character in Robert the Bruce, who, by the way, I happen to be a descendant of. Isn't that fascinating?
It is.
But that's another story. But no, I wouldn't do that because then you just clutter up the log line. Just think about the through line. Keep it simple. Through line. The through line of that story is William Wallace's struggle to win the freedom of Scotland. That is the core of that. That's the log line.
Logline number 4. All right. The screenwriter Kelsey Ann Wacker. Kelsey Ann, are you here? Right back here. All right. Awesome. The project is Carneytown. It's an episodic. Believing the world will end in 1975, a teenaged preacher's daughter escapes from a fundamental cult by stowing away in a circus caravan to experience the world before it ends. But where she finds herself is Gibsonton, Florida, the winter home of the Freaks, a trailer park in a swamp that is home to a close-knit community of carnies, freaks, and other human oddities.
All right, so the world, I find it to be, of course, very compelling. You know, Todd Browning's Freaks was like one of my favorite movies as a kid. And I love stuff that's set, you know, in the world of carnies. So sometimes a logline just appeals to the reader's sensibility. This is cool, where maybe Genevieve has no interest in this stuff and maybe is even offended by the use of the word freaks and won't even look at it. or just it's a very quick pass for her. But again, I'm sort of struggling with what I got here also, which is that I don't know what the conflict is. There's a little bit of conflict with her leaving the cult. By the way, very awkward, teenaged preacher's daughter. Why not say a preacher's teenage daughter? No? Am I wrong there? That just feels a little awkward. Or I would even say, why do you have preacher in the log line? Because this is a little bit like the word INN was earlier. There's no mention of the preacher at all in this. It's not like he's coming back to find her no, but he's not in the log line. Right, and so that's the thing that you have to keep in mind, is that the screenplay and the log line are different. They're two very different animals, so you have to feed them differently. So you do have to make certain kinds of cuts for the purposes of a log line, like not including Robert the Bruce, perhaps. So it could really just be, a teenage girl escaped from a fundamentalist cult, which is interesting enough. But then again, once she gets to Florida, like she's there, and then what? And your log line should always infer and then what? And that's what this doesn't have. So that's what's missing. If you could take out some of the words, because it's a little too wordy, and then just put in what it is that she's doing. What is her goal? Make it active. That's what Josh was talking about earlier, having active characters. Then I think this could be very interesting.
Is it corny to end it in a question? Like in this case, if he says something like, could she find a new home with the freaks before her father comes to take her back? ?
Right. So again, maybe that's the way you write a log line. I would say don't do that. Because again, a log line is not some kind of advertising ploy. You're not trying to be cute. It's literally the 411. You're literally giving, it is like a utilitarian tool. You're just giving me that information that I need. And if the information is interesting, then I should be intrigued by it. My interest should be piqued by it, where I don't need some goofy question, as if it's, like some old cliffhanger serial or something, Will Batman survive? Tune in next week. That's not the function of a log line.
All right, great. One more log line. Then we're going to go through a couple more questions after this. Log line number 5. This is JJ Polak. JJ, are you in the room? Awesome. It's a film, Electric Eye. A disillusioned social media moderator struggles to maintain her sanity as she chases the men behind a particularly disturbing video from work. Taxi driver for the information age.
All right, so there's some interesting things here. I always use the word struggles. I use the word a lot because it infers conflict. It's a good word to use in a log line. But here it's to maintain her sanity, which is internal. So, I don't know what that means. I don't know how you film that. So that part kind of sticks in my craw a little bit. But then she's chasing the men behind a particularly disturbing video from work. That to me is potentially interesting, but it still feels a little vague, like particularly disturbing. That's kind of an odd word to, either it's disturbing or it's not disturbing, right? So again, remember, you're writers. So word choice should be very specific. Edit, look over things, say, too much, or this word dilutes. What is the video, since you're here? Now, if this came to my desk, I would pass. Just being honest, I would pass. But you're here, so I can ask you a question that I can't ask at my office. What is the video?
And I believe this film is screening at AFMX. Is that right, JJ?
No,
Am
I had a
wrong about
different
that?
film.
Okay.
I had a short that screened right before
Okay.
this. The video shows a little girl having her organs harvested while she's still conscious.
Okay.
Which I feel like is maybe a little too
extreme. Not like
extreme
it should
to
matter
say.
if she's conscious or not. I think, right? Just, having your organs harvested is probably bad enough. particularly bad enough.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your attempted brevity here, but like this could be so many things. Like my head went immediately to something that was sexual, which my guess is probably the majority of the people did. Yes? No. That's where we tend to go. Look, you know, one of the best movies in the last 10 years, in my opinion, was Promising Young Woman. You like that movie? Who liked that? Wasn't that movie, was that not incredible? What a great screenplay. If you haven't seen that movie, you gotta see it. And it won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay, so it's not, you know, it's not like I'm saying anything that's, you know. Yeah, you know, like that character was really compelling. So when I see this, that kind of sparks in my head just a tiny, tiny bit, which bodes well for you. But I think we should probably know what the video is so we're not misled. But of course, you have to find a way to say that in as few words as possible. And then, I don't know, maybe you just get rid of the maintain her sanity and that she's struggling to find these men, or, well, she's chasing these men. Why is she chasing them? Like, I mean, she's chased, so like, is the whole movie her, like, I mean, like, what does that mean? Because again, it's like, you know, like, I've got to look at this and say, what is she doing? Because I have a client, you know, who will say to me all the time, well, what is the character doing? This is what Josh touched upon earlier. Yeah. You know, what is the character doing? Because the actor wants to know what it is that he's going to play. And so she's chasing people. So it's vague, right? So what is she actually doing?
Well, first she has to identify who they are, then she has to try and get them, taken to jail, but then that doesn't work.
So she's trying to apprehend them. She's trying to
bring them
gather
to justice,
evidence against them.
Bring them to justice, yeah. She's trying to get them, thrown in jail, basically.
Okay, so maybe you could just be a little bit more specific. That she's struggles to bring to justice, several men or co-workers or this or that, and they have a disturbing video. Are they the people that harvested the organs? You see all the questions that I have here? Are they the people that harvested the organs, or do they just have the video? Like, I can have a video of Linda Lovelace and the dog, but that doesn't mean that I had anything to do with that video. So what is this about?
They're the men in the video, I guess would be a better way to phrase it.
Okay, but so then it's really not even about the video, it's really more about the men who killed the girl for her organs. So maybe you just say that. You see what I'm saying? And then it's very specific. It's a hard job I got up here, You may not appreciate it, but it's a hard job. I got to do a lot of your work. You should have had this all done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. I'm curious what you think of the phrase taxi driver for the information age. How useful is it to use an example like that?
Okay, that's a very good question. I would not put it in a log line, but I just kind of stopped reading after work. But I think in a pitch, it's very helpful. I think in a pitch, it's very, very helpful. So what I would do if you are going to pitch, you might say either just before or after you reveal the log line, then you would say it's taxi driver for the information age. And then we sort of get that. But yes, I think it's good and I think it's helpful.
Great.
I was going to ask the same question. So you shouldn't say Stranger Things meets Star Wars in the log line. You should wait for the pitch guy.
Right, yeah. It's not part of the log line. The log line is who is the protagonist, what does the protagonist want, and what stands in the protagonist's way.
All right. This session went by insanely fast.
I don't think so. It felt
No?
like hours to me.
We didn't have a time. No, I know we put a break on there, but I don't.
Are you kidding
me? We're
me?
almost done with the session. That's crazy.
I
10
worked hard
minutes.
today.
Wow. We have time
I'm
for a few more questions.
Okay, questions.
Right over here. And then we'll go right over here. Yeah.
By the way, honestly, this woman really does amazing. She really does such a good job.
Thank you.
She really does.
Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt having a great guest.
No,
though.
no,
I mean,
don't,
come on.
don't,
like-
spin, don't spin it around on me. This is about you. It's about you. But thank you.
Okay, so my question is, how do you know when to start your story?
They always say try to start it as late as you can, right? And that's a hard question for me to answer because every story is different. Try to get in as close to the conflict as you can, to the character's dilemma, what it is that the character is going to be struggling to do in the movie. In this case, she's trying to find these men that are responsible for harvesting some girl's organs. Try to start as close to that as you can.
Hi. We covered in the Joshua Michael Stern, he's in his session, he basically said that when you go to write a script, basically just write yourself, write the things that you like to write your personality in the script, write you. And if you're pitching a script that you're writing that, say, you might also want to like be a producer on or potentially even direct, would you say that pitching itself for something like that is also selling you alongside selling the story?
You are always selling you because it's about who you're going to work with. It's like if you're pitching to an agent or a manager because you're trying to get repped, you want your personality to come through. You want that person to say, this is somebody that I want to work with. It's the same thing with anybody else because you spend a lot of time with people. You're often in confined spaces. People get hot under the collar when it comes to creative stuff. And it's nice if you can at least respect the people that you're working with. So yes, I would say always, provided that you're not like some kind of deviant or something, always let your true self come through.
Okay, thank you.
At this point in your career and your position at William Morris, you're just inundated with scripts, right? You're not going out to look at the blacklist, looking at different screenwriting competitions, or having to search anywhere else for the scripts that you're just being delivered from top agencies?
That is correct. Yes. So, because of the people that I work with, they are magnets. So, like way back in the beginning when I started the job, I was, very gung-ho and out trying to find stuff. Everything comes to me now. That doesn't mean that, I won't hear about stuff but you mentioned the blacklist. Those and Josh also mentioned it that these things are good. Not all of them. A lot of them suck and they're just draining your money and they're useless and worthless. But there are a few. There are some contests that are good. You have to put yourself out there. People don't always want to take a chance on somebody. So if you can say, hey, I won the nickel, or my script was a semifinalist in the nickel, that might give somebody a little bit more assurance that, you got some of the right stuff, at least.
Right.
So try to get your stuff out there. Always get it out there. And by the way, just because nobody's asked, I'm kind of surprised. How do you get an agent? Nobody asked. You asked Josh, right. And Josh, he kind of danced around a little bit. So how do you get an agent? Well, the truth is that I'm always very glib about it, and I like to say, you know that you're ready for an agent when they're knocking on your door. But I would say first and foremost for writers, look for managers first. Don't go to an agent. Go to a manager. Managers are about cultivating talent. Agents are about making deals. If you don't have any deals to make, then you're not ready for an agent. Get a manager. The manager will, when he or she believes you're ready for an agent, will make introductions for you because the manager will want to make sure that it's an agent that they like also. So enter contests, do whatever you can to be able to allow your stuff to rise above the other stuff. And do other things, like I know agents who read short stories from Reddit and sign writers from that. This is why when I say get your stuff out there, get your stuff out there. You cannot advance in this business if you keep your stuff in a drawer. You have to get it out there. You got to share it. And of course, you got to have a network, right? Relationships and a network. It's all about a network. You cannot make it in this business alone.
We have just a few minutes remaining. Would your last piece of advice be that? Would what's one key piece of advice in addition to getting their work out there and doing the work? We talked about just doing the work, constantly writing, constantly.
Right. That was what
refining.
Josh said, and that was right on.
Yeah.
You need to constantly be producing stuff, whether it's a short story, by the way, short stories now are really popular. So like I just got a short story this morning, that I have to read for Rachel McAdams. It's like, is this a movie? All of a sudden, people in development are considering short stories. I have a friend that just wrote a short story. It was really actually like a treatment, it was really like a treatment for the first act of a screenplay, but he called it a short story. And everybody's like, wow, what a great short story. And now he sold it. You got to think outside of the box. So think outside of the box and just constantly be working. If you're a director, you need to be directing. If you're a writer, you need to be writing. If you're a producer, you need to be producing. It's not fair for you to call yourself a producer when you're not making movies. It's not fair to call yourself a director if you're not directing movies. And it's not fair to call yourself a writer if you're not writing. You have to do the work. And then you have to share it. Get it out there.
Right.
And if the work is good, then something will click. Somewhere, somebody will champion you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank
you
everybody.
so
Thank
much,
you.
Christopher.
Thank
Yeah.
you.